Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I'm completely overwhelmed. I feel like I'm losing my mind. My fiancée, Sabrina, 28F, and I, 34M, have been together for 6 years and engaged for 1. Our wedding is set for just 2 weeks from now, but tonight I saw something that has made me question everything. Sabrina and I were relaxing at home. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and I was out back working on a project. We live on some acreage, and I'm building a pagoda with a fire pit for us to use this fall. As I was working, I got thirsty, so I came inside to grab a drink. When I walked into the kitchen, I heard Sabrina talking on speakerphone. It was my brother-in-law, Max. Max asked Sabrina where Elaine, his wife of 5 years, was because he hadn't been able to reach her. Sabrina told him that Elaine had just left and would be home in about half an hour. At first, I didn't really process what she said, but then I asked her about it. She told me that Max had been trying to get in touch with Elaine, and she was just texting her to let her know. But that's when things started to seem off. I heard Sabrina say Elaine had been there, but Elaine wasn't there. The last time we saw her was yesterday when she helped Sabrina with some last-minute wedding decorations. And why was Sabrina texting Elaine when Max said she hadn't been answering her texts? Then, Sabrina said Elaine would be back in 30 minutes, which made me think, how did she know that unless she was either talking to Elaine or was just lying to Max? It started to look like Sabrina was covering for Elaine, possibly warning her to hurry back home. I spent hours overthinking this, running through all sorts of scenarios in my head. I really wanted to ask Sabrina about it, but if I'm right, I probably wouldn't get the truth anyway. So, an hour ago, I woke up at 1 a.m. to use the bathroom, and I couldn't resist checking Sabrina's phone. We both know each other's pins, so it wasn't hard. When I unlocked her phone, I found exactly what I feared. Elaine has been having an affair for the past 6 months with a coworker, and Sabrina has been helping her cover it up all along. There are literally hundreds of text messages between Sabrina and Elaine, discussing everything about the affair, the coworker, and even explicit details about their personal lives. Some of it is deeply embarrassing and uncomfortable, including unflattering comments about Max. And here's my soon-to-be wife, just going along with it, without a second thought. I took screenshots of the whole conversation, put the phone back, and retreated to my office to write this post on Reddit instead of letting out the primal scream that I'm desperately holding in. I feel completely screwed. I can't marry Sabrina, I just can't. I can't think of any reasonable explanation she could give for helping her sister with this affair, especially when it's hurting Max and their young daughter. But on the other hand, my family, Sabrina's family, and I have all invested a huge amount of money into this wedding, which is set to happen in 2 weeks. We're not getting any of that money back. On top of that, I feel like an absolute fool. How did I not see this coming? How could I have been so blind? I thought we had a bright future, but now I can't look at her the same way. It feels like a huge stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I don't know how I got this so wrong, and I'm dreading having to confront it. I feel sick to my stomach and want to break something. I don't need convincing to call off the wedding. I already know it's over. I'm just trying to figure out my next steps and find the courage to go through with it. There's a lot of pressure from everyone's expectations, but I'm not giving in. I just don't look forward to dealing with the fallout, and I'm more than a little angry about being in this situation. It's 5 a.m. now. I have work in 3 hours and only a couple of hours of sleep. I'm going to take a shower and head in early to avoid Sabrina. Thanks to the supportive people here, and a big raspberry to those who keep saying I should find some good reason for my fiancé's actions. I got into work around 7 a.m. and found the office empty, so I decided to start pulling off the band-aid. I called my brother, who lives in Australia and was still up after putting his kids to bed. It was hard to break the news to him, especially since he's already spent a lot of money on flights to attend the wedding. But to his credit, he didn't mention that once and just supported me. He made a great point. He said, paraphrasing, "You work in a job where you deal with liars and scammers every day. I don't blame you for wanting a place where you don't have to worry about that." He was totally right about that, and now I understand why I'm reacting so strongly to Sabrina's involvement in this deception. He also had a great idea. He was planning to take his family to Florida for some sightseeing and to visit the parks. Well, now the kids will be accompanied by their uncle too. It should be easy since we were going to honeymoon there as well, and we planned on meeting up with them. So, I'll just rebook everything closer to him and his family, and I'll offer Sabrina's ticket to either my sister or another family member. I haven't had time to read all the comments, but I've responded to a few. Right now, I'm just making myself sick by drinking cup after cup of coffee, trying to distract myself until I can reach out to Max. I just did morning stand-up. My stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking about 2 pots of coffee since I got in so early, and I can't focus at all. I feel like I can't really do anything on my side until I talk to Max, so I'm going to take a sick day and drive over to his house. If he's not around, I'll call him and track him down. Max is a teacher on break right now, and Elaine works a 9 to 5 like me, so odds are good this will work out. Wish me luck, Reddit. I got to Max's house just after 10 a.m. He had just put his daughter down for a nap, and we had a long, frankly brutal talk in the kitchen. He'd suspected something for a couple of months, but Elaine has been very good at covering her tracks with Sabrina's help and a few mutual friends. Unfortunately, I don't have all 6 months of text messages, just a couple dozen screenshots I sent to myself from Sabrina's phone, but I gave him what I had and offered to help however I could. I work as a field analyst in the SIU department for a mid-sized insurer specializing in workers' compensation fraud, so I know a thing or two and have some connections. Anyway, now I'm working from my laptop in my almost brother-in-law's kitchen, trying to salvage what I can. I'll have to talk to Sabrina tonight and get the word out to my friends and family. Now that I know I won't screw over Max, I've rebooked most of the honeymoon, though I had a bit of a hassle with the ticket because Sabrina was flying under her maiden name, and our carrier has a surname rule for name changes. They allowed me to cancel and get a partial refund, so I rebooked it for my sister, who'll be going with her 2 brothers and nieces to Florida in a couple of weeks. I'm holding off on canceling the venues until after I talk to Sabrina, though, because I don't want to tip anyone off until Max gets his chance to confront Elaine. But I'll definitely be letting my family and friends know later this afternoon and begging them to keep it quiet. I'm basically in a frenzy right now canceling what I can, and I'm heading to the bank in a few to open a new account and get my bills sorted out. Some people have raised questions about this, but it should be manageable. The mortgage is in my name since we weren't married, and I have the higher income. However, Sabrina did contribute about $20,000 to the down payment, compared to my $60,000. I'll likely need to pay her back that amount and a portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months, but it could be worse. P.S. I'm not sure why so many people are confused about the whole brother versus brother-in-law situation. I'm going to go silent for a while. This post has already spread on TikTok and has gone way beyond what I expected when I was freaking out in the middle of the night. First, I want to clarify something. I don't hate Sabrina. I don't approve of what she did. I find it repulsive, and I'm shocked by how two-faced she can be and how she treats people, but I don't hate her. I'm just incredibly sad about everything. The real screwed up part of my post is the short time frame I'm working with. Our relationship is at a point where I can't marry her, but we're supposed to get married in 2 weeks. Maybe if we had a couple of months, or better yet, a year or so to work through this, I might approach this differently, but I don't have that luxury. I need to act now. There's no way I can get married with things the way they are now. So that's it. End of discussion. I'll update you guys later tonight about how things went. Hopefully it won't be as traumatic as I'm anticipating. I have no idea how long a Reddit post can be, as I've never written one this long before, so I hope it goes through. It's about 8:30 p.m. right now, and I'm writing this from my buddy Mark's house. He's a former coworker of mine, and we both work in the same field. As I mentioned earlier, I work as a field analyst in the SIU department of a mid-sized insurance company. For those who don't know, I'm basically a private investigator for workers' compensation fraud. Anyway, as I hinted before, Max asked for my help in finding out who Elaine's affair partner is. All we had to go on was a name, let's call him Jack. The first thing I did wasn't any major detective work, but just going through LinkedIn to see if I could find him through Elaine's connections. That led to nothing, which I found strange. Max told me that Elaine was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work and wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't even need to tell me what he suspected. I understood right away. I told him I'd help, but he needed to come with me. I then reached out to my buddy Mark, explained the situation, and asked him to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Max's parents' house so they could watch their granddaughter. I'm not sure what Max told them, but I waited in the car. After that, we went to Elaine's workplace. It was one of those large commercial strip mall centers, with rows of nondescript offices in a big, non-gated parking lot. We drove around until we spotted Elaine's car. Then Max unlocked it with the spare set of keys. I handed him a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once that was done, we parked a little ways down the street and waited for my friend to arrive, as well as for Elaine to leave her office. Mark showed up about 20 minutes later and hopped into the car with us. Around an hour later, Elaine came out of her office with 2 of her girlfriends and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They were holding hands, and I thought to myself, damn, Elaine, you're making this easy. I snapped a couple of pictures from the car and waited for Elaine to leave. When she did, I started tracking her. At first, I thought she might go straight to a hotel, but instead, she drove to a nice bar and grill in a good part of town and parked on the street. I drove by as she was getting out of her car and heading inside, then found my own parking spot to review the plan. We sent Mark in first since no one knew him. He had 2 main tasks: get any compromising photos of Elaine and Jack, and act as my alibi. Max and I waited in the car for about 20 minutes until I received the first of Mark's text pictures of Elaine and Jack kissing in front of their two female coworkers. Max's suspicions were right. The coworkers were helping Elaine hide the affair from him. He was clearly upset and angry. One of the coworkers was married, and she and her partner were close friends with both Max and Elaine, with toddlers about the same age. I asked Max if that was enough for him, but he insisted on knowing who the guy was. I suggested we could find out later, but he was practically begging me, so I told him to wait. I texted Mark to let him know I was coming in, then walked into the bar myself. The first thing I saw was Elaine and her group laughing and drinking at one of those tall, round tables near the front window. I paused for a moment, pretending to be surprised, and then called out to her. "Elaine, hi, what are you doing here?" She was clearly shocked to see me, and everyone around her tensed up immediately. Elaine quickly introduced me as her sister's fiancé, saying we were getting married in 2 weeks. There were congratulations all around, and I thanked them before reaching out to shake the blonde guy's hand, introducing myself with my full name, hoping he'd respond in kind. He did, but I was taken aback he wasn't named Jack. I introduced myself to everyone else, then told Elaine I was here to meet a coworker. I waved to Mark and excused myself. Once I reached Mark, I told him the guy's name, and we both pulled out our phones to get to work. It didn't take long for us to find him. He has social media profiles and a couple of court judgments against him, and everything started to make sense once we discovered that Jack is actually his middle name. At that point, I was mostly just relieved that Elaine wasn't cheating on Max with 2 different coworkers. Turns out Jack is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter. Just when you think it can't get worse, it does. I texted Max the guy's real name, then decided to push things a little further and asked him to hold off for a few more minutes. I was basically acting as a babysitter at the bar, sitting in plain view of Elaine and her group. I could tell they weren't thrilled I was there. My presence was clearly ruining their night, which was exactly what I wanted. I let this go on for about 10 minutes before telling Max to text Elaine and say he was staying the night at his parents' place with their daughter. Not long after that, I caught Elaine pulling out her phone and showing something to Jack. Moments later, the whole group decided to wrap things up. Elaine walked over, said goodnight, and casually asked if Sabrina and I wanted to come over for dinner that weekend. I smiled, told her that sounded great, and wished everyone a good night. Mark and I waited until they were gone, paid our tab, and then quickly made our way back to where Max was waiting. We weren't sure what Elaine's plan was. There was a chance she had already booked a hotel room, which would have complicated things, but it seemed that tonight was originally just meant to be drinks. It was only after Max said he'd be at his parents' that Elaine shifted gears. She headed straight home, and we followed discreetly, parking down the street. A short while later, another car pulled into Max's driveway. We saw Jack get out, walk up to the door, and be welcomed inside by Elaine. By then it was about 7:30 p.m., and I had my own matters to deal with. I figured I'd done all I could as a friend. I definitely felt bad for Max, but I didn't want to get even more entangled in this mess. Playing wingman while he confronted his cheating wife was too much, especially given everything I'm dealing with myself. Max said he was fine handling it from there. I told him to grab my gear from Elaine's car, which he did, and then we said our goodbyes. That was nearly 2 hours ago. He did send me one text saying it was over and that he really was going to his parents' house this time. I haven't heard anything else since, and Elaine hasn't blown up my phone either. I've been at Mark's place ever since. So I think that pretty much wraps up my part in Max's story. If he took my advice, he had his phone recording when he went inside the house. I'll find out more later, but my main priority right now is going home to tell Sabrina that the wedding is off. She's almost certainly going to take it badly. There's just no way around that. But like I've said before, I just can't go through with marrying her in the current state of our relationship. I don't know what the future holds for us, or if this will be the end entirely, but what I do know is that there's no wedding happening anytime soon. To everyone asking, why didn't you talk to her first? Why didn't you confront her? Honestly, are you people serious? She lied, point blank, to her brother-in-law, a man she's known for about a decade and supposedly respects as a great husband and father. Maybe you're naive enough to think someone who can lie that easily to someone close to them will turn around and be honest with you, but I'm not wired that way. Until that moment, I had never had a single reason to doubt Sabrina or mistrust her. But then she was blatantly dishonest right in front of me. And somehow I'm supposed to brush that off and assume she'll be straight with me? I don't think some of you understand what it's like to have your entire perception of a person flip in an instant. It's disorienting and borderline panic-inducing. Honestly, I'm impressed with myself for keeping calm and trusting my instincts instead of confronting her immediately. If I had, she probably would have lied, deleted the texts, and I would have never learned the truth, never seen how manipulative she could be, never realized just how little I actually knew her. So yeah, I'm going home to talk to Sabrina. I'll update everyone later on how it goes, just don't expect a happy ending. I had the talk with Sabrina last night. It was intense. I'm completely burned out and still exhausted. Even after taking another sick day and sleeping in until nearly 11 a.m., sleep deficit is real, folks. I know everyone's eager for updates, and writing them is actually therapeutic for me, but I'm totally drained right now. Also, if you haven't noticed, brevity isn't exactly my strong suit. Chalk it up to my profession and the never-ending reports I've had to write over the years. Here's the TLDR. I came home to break the news to Sabrina and found her on the couch, comforting Elaine. I nearly turned around and walked right back out, but I didn't. Words were exchanged, emotions ran high, people cried, people yelled, and yes, the police were called. Eventually, I just collapsed and slept for 10 hours straight. Now my phone looks like it's about to catch fire from the sheer number of missed calls and unread messages. If it keeps vibrating, I might as well take it to Elaine's office and start charging $10 a minute for people to sit on it. Things are still very much in limbo. My family already knew what was going on by yesterday afternoon, but today I need to start reaching out to friends and taking the next steps forward. I'm just going to answer a few things and then take a break to handle some real-life tasks. First off, I'm not James Bond. I'm the guy tailing a disabled construction worker to a Zumba class or a skydiving session. I've been doing this kind of surveillance for about 5 years, and I'm good at it. Nothing I did here went beyond using a $50 GPS tracker you can get on Amazon and employing a small amount of social engineering. You'd be surprised how far a little cleverness can get you, but anyway. Second, I'm officially clocked out of the case of Max and the Hobgoblin. What Max does with the information he now has, including whether or not he contacts Jack's wife, is entirely up to him. I'm not getting further involved. Max is a good friend, but right now, my own personal life is falling apart. And now that the rush of moral outrage has faded, that collapse is hitting me a lot harder than I was letting on. Third, I'm not an aspiring screenwriter or novelist. I do, however, write a lot, mainly reports. Most of my life is spent hunched over a laptop transcribing statements or writing up findings. For every hour I spend doing fieldwork, I probably spend 10 hours on paperwork and research. Fourth, some of you are right, I shouldn't have left Max to handle that situation alone. I wasn't worried at all that he'd do anything reckless, but I also didn't fully consider the emotional toll or the potential risks he might face. That's a shortcoming of mine. I tend to assume that others will handle things the same way I do. And since it's something I would have done solo, I didn't second guess it. But that was a misjudgment, and I'm working on it. Emotionally, I've not been in a great place, and I recognize that my emotional intelligence was probably pretty low during that moment. Lastly, to the people saying things like, "You don't know the whole story, what if Max was the abuser?" No, you don't know the whole story. I do. I've read 6 months worth of text messages. I know why Elaine did what she did. I know exactly how she feels about Max. I know what role my ex-fiancé played in this mess. I'm just not sharing all of it because some of it is truly vile. But trust me, if Sabrina had acted differently, even slightly, if she'd shown the least bit of hesitation or morality, we probably wouldn't even be here. But she didn't. So here we are. That's it for now. I'll try to post another update in the coming days once the fallout settles a bit. But for now, I'm stepping away from Reddit. Thanks to everyone who's supported me, it's meant a lot, and helped me stay somewhat sane through all of this. August 8th, 2023. At first, I was a bit uneasy about how public this whole thing had become. Like, what have I gotten myself into? But after this past weekend, I've decided to just embrace it. The cat's already out of the bag, and honestly, I don't believe I've done anything wrong, despite a small group of critics suggesting otherwise. There's a lot to unpack, and most of it, if I'm being completely honest, hasn't been great. In fact, it's been downright awful, but I'll get to that. For those just catching up, the original post is linked here, titled, "I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I'm totally screwed." So, I left Mark's place pretty late that night. Sabrina already knew I was out with him discussing business, though she had no clue the business in question was actually her sister's affair. Still, it was getting late, unreasonably so. Mostly because I kept stalling, trying to gather the nerve to go home and face her. After 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark, I finally got up, texted Sabrina to let her know I was on my way, and headed out. As I mentioned in the last update, I was completely thrown when I got home and saw Elaine crying on the couch with Sabrina. I hadn't seen Elaine's car in the driveway, so this was the last thing I expected. I froze in the doorway, seriously considering just turning around and leaving. This wasn't how I pictured any of this going down, and her being there was only going to make things worse. Still, I was on a clock. I had people to notify, wedding logistics to cancel, and time was not on my side. When I entered the room, both Sabrina and Elaine looked up to acknowledge me, but no flood of accusations or questions followed. I just stared back, silently raising my eyebrows in question. The moment passed. Elaine returned to sobbing. Sabrina resumed consoling her, and the awkward silence hung in the air for a solid 30 seconds. I realized then that Max probably hadn't mentioned my involvement in exposing Elaine's affair, so I decided to play dumb not to hide anything, but to see how Sabrina would react. I sat down in the recliner, set my laptop bag aside, pulled my phone from my pocket, and pretended to fidget with it. Then I casually asked, "What's going on?" Elaine kept crying, but Sabrina looked at me and said, "Max is divorcing Elaine." Well, yeah, I figured that much. So, I pushed forward with the obvious follow-up. "What for?" Sabrina stopped patting Elaine's back for a moment and looked at me. Her face twisted into the kind of expression you'd expect from a 5-year-old being told to finish their broccoli or eat a pile of lima beans. Elaine gave Sabrina a sharp look, one that didn't require sisterly intuition to decode, and then there was a long, heavy pause. Finally, Sabrina answered, "She cheated on him." And I have to admit that absolutely floored me. It was the last thing I expected her to say. Sure, some of you cynics might think, well, the truth was out, so what's the point in hiding it anymore? Yes, that's true, but it's also true that she could have just as easily played dumb or phrased it differently, like saying Max accused Elaine of cheating, rather than flat out confirming it to my face. Maybe I'm being overly cautious or even paranoid, but it's part of my job to pay attention not just to what people say, but how they say it. Elaine clearly wasn't happy with how it came out. She sank deeper into the couch and let out this weird mixture of a sigh and a sob. I wanted to press forward, go for the proverbial goal, but I must have hesitated. Maybe I stammered a bit, and Sabrina probably took that for shock, and she wouldn't have been wrong, just not for the reason she assumed. "Did you know?" I asked. Sabrina didn't say anything, just nodded, still rubbing Elaine's shoulder. I didn't wait and went straight to the next obvious question. "How long?" The answer came quicker and easier than I expected. 6 months. I was stunned by how casually she said it. Elaine was too. She slapped her sister's hand away, clearly thrown by the confession. Even Sabrina seemed startled by having said it out loud. I leaned back in the recliner and rubbed my face. Time to rip the Band-Aid all the way off. We're not getting married. The looks I got could only be described as 2 deer caught in headlights, followed by a twin what? From both sisters. I stood up and repeated myself. We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would help cover up an affair, especially not for 6 months. Sabrina jumped up from the couch, arms open, her body language screaming, "You can't be serious." But I just held my hands up. "I'm serious. I don't like any of this, not what you did, not how I feel about it. Going through with this would be a mistake." That's when the waterworks started. Sabrina broke down in sobs, and even Elaine made that weird pursed lip, fish out of water face like she was gasping for air. There were tears, wails, Sabrina accusing me of not loving her, begging me to think of everything we'd lose, the money, the time, the embarrassment. Nothing she said was new to me. I'd already considered it all. But hearing it through her gut-wrenching sobs was a whole different experience. And then I probably made a big mistake, or maybe not. I don't know how long Max would have kept my involvement quiet, but I wanted to drive home the point that this wasn't some emotional bluff. So I said, "Look, I already canceled the honeymoon. It's done." I knew I'd lit a fuse the moment those words left my mouth, and the explosion followed instantly. Elaine, to her credit, had always been quick to catch on, probably why she was able to keep her husband in the dark for so long. I could literally see the realization dawning on her, piecing everything together. My appearance at the bar earlier, what Sabrina just admitted, and now the canceled honeymoon. She screamed, "You son of a," and launched herself at me. Now, I'm not a small guy, but I'm not huge either, and she came at me like a missile. I staggered back and barely got my hands up before she started clawing at my face with her fingernails. I almost dropped the phone I was still holding, but managed to push Elaine away and shouted, "Elaine, get off me. Sabrina, get your sister under control." Elaine lunged at me again, but surprisingly, Sabrina did exactly what I asked. She wrapped her arms around Elaine's waist and held her back. I looked directly at Elaine and yelled, "Get out of here right now, or I'm calling the police," holding up my phone to emphasize the point. Sabrina tried to de-escalate things, saying, "OP, please, let's all calm down. She doesn't have anywhere to go." Max took her car keys. That explained the missing vehicle in the driveway, but I didn't care. I was done, completely done with Elaine, and I wanted her to know it. I stormed into my home office, locked the door, and called the police. I told them I had been attacked by my fiancé's sister, that I had locked myself in my office, and that I was bleeding from a scratch near my eye. My vision was blurred, and I told them I feared for my safety. I also let them know I had recorded the entire incident on my phone. Just as I was wrapping up my call, Sabrina knocked on the door. "Opie, please come out. We need to talk about this. Please, I love you. Don't do this. We don't need to go this far." Elaine's sorry, she wants to apologize. I was pretty sure that last part was a lie, but Sabrina was clearly unraveling. I didn't respond, and her pleas faded just as I heard the police arrive at the front door. I heard Sabrina speaking with them, and after a moment, I came out. Two officers were there, one younger, probably around Sabrina's age, and the other older and looking like he was already done with the day. I introduced myself, pointed to Elaine, and told them she had attacked me. I offered to show them the recording on my phone. The younger officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He asked again. Again, I said yes. Before he could ask a third time, I cut him off. Yes, damn it. I want to press charges. I have video evidence. This is going to court, or I'll call your boss and ask him to come down here himself. I mentioned the chief by name. They were clearly surprised that I knew who he was, not that we were friends or anything. But in my line of work, I've had plenty of interactions with local law enforcement and had spoken to most of the department leadership at one point or another. At this point, I was seething. I understood what the officers were probably thinking, but I didn't agree. The facts were simple. Elaine assaulted me in my own home, and I wanted her removed. Thankfully, things didn't escalate any further. The officers cuffed Elaine and placed her in the back of the patrol car. She was squealing and sobbing like some kind of frantic maniac the entire time, and Sabrina wasn't doing much better. She just kept repeating no, please no, over and over again. Then the younger cop circled back and asked if everything was okay. I told him I was going to bed. He turned to Sabrina and asked her again. When she didn't immediately respond, he repeated, "Ma'am, is everything okay here?" It was pretty clear what he was trying to get at, and I was really starting to dislike this guy. Still, I bit my tongue. Sabrina finally seemed to register the question and gave a small nod. Apparently not satisfied, the officer looked like he was about to keep pushing when I cut in and said, "If you're planning to go on a fishing expedition, maybe do it out on the lawn where my doorbell camera won't catch it." At that point, I think I pushed my luck one step too far. I could feel the tension spike, and I was probably about 30 seconds from getting cuffed myself. Thankfully, the older cop stepped in. He looked to be in his late 50s, the kind of guy who clearly wasn't looking to start his shift with a complicated situation. He pulled his partner aside and, I'm pretty sure, talked him down. A few minutes later, they left, taking Elaine with them and, hopefully, out of my life for good. After that, I started seriously debating whether I wanted to stay in the house at all. My parents live a couple of hours away, and the thought of my rapidly shrinking bank account ruled out both a hotel and crashing with them. So I opted for the guest room. Sabrina made a few half-hearted attempts to talk or asked me to sleep in our bed, but I told her we'd talk tomorrow. I was tired and didn't want to be disturbed. Thankfully, she left me alone, and I crashed harder than I had in years. Which brings us up to the last update. But, dear Reddit friends, let me tell you, the next day was the weirdest damn day of my life. To start with, I woke up at 11 a.m. Sabrina was still home and had clearly been busy. The house was spotless. I mean, the floors gleamed, the toilet sparkled, and the bathroom smelled like a pine-scented commercial. She had been scrubbing away all morning. When she saw me, she hovered nearby close enough to show she was present, but not quite engaged. She looked like she wanted to speak, but didn't know how. I understood. The night before had been traumatic for everyone. She probably didn't know where we stood, whether the wedding was canceled in the heat of the moment, if I meant it, or if I was still furious. I took a deep breath and told her we needed to finish our conversation. She tried to sit beside me on the couch, and while I considered brushing her off, I didn't. We weren't getting married, but I didn't need to act like I hated her because I didn't. I was disappointed in her. Deeply, and honestly, disgusted by some of her actions. I had already read the text exchanges between her and her sister, and while we were both hurting, I didn't want to make things worse or escalate the situation any further than it already had. Life was complicated enough. It took more effort than I expected to get Sabrina to truly accept that the wedding was off. She wasn't handling it well, actually. That's putting it mildly. She was an absolute wreck. I think she was hyperventilating at one point. I was keeping it together better, but that's probably because this had been my decision. I'd had more time to come to terms with it. Eventually, she asked the inevitable, serious question, "What about us?" Now, I know some people are going to come for me about this, especially the crowd that believes every mistake in a relationship is grounds for immediate detonation. And sure, maybe calling off the wedding felt like dropping a Moab on our 6-year relationship. But the truth is, I didn't have an answer for Sabrina in that moment. I genuinely didn't know. And I told her that. I said I had read all those text messages, and they showed me a side of her I didn't recognize, a side I wasn't sure I could trust or be with. I said I didn't understand how she could go along with Elaine as she trashed Max, actively encouraging the cheating, not just betraying him, but betraying their daughter too. All Sabrina could say was, I know it was wrong. I asked for an explanation, but she didn't really have one. She just said she got carried away, and that she felt she had to choose her sister. I told her that being a good sister should mean keeping each other accountable, not giving a green light to act like garbage. She agreed and said she wanted to do better, but then added that Elaine had always been the dominant one, the one in control, and Sabrina had always been the follower. I get that, to some extent. I have an older sibling too, but I've also lived on the other side of the planet from him for the last 18 years, only seeing him around the holidays. And maybe that distance gave me an edge, because while my sibling is a solid person, Elaine is, well, trash. And then came the second major shock of my life in less than 48 hours. Sabrina said, "It's not fair." "What's not fair?" I asked. "You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year, and I got over it." I was so hurt, but I got over it. "Why can't you get over this?" "Wait, what? What the hell was she talking about? Who the hell is Mandy?" I had no idea what she meant. I asked her if she was high or having a breakdown. Yeah, that was harsh, but I was blindsided. I haven't sexted anyone. I haven't been cyber anything with anyone, especially not some supposed Instagram chick. By now I was protesting loudly, and Sabrina was crying and yelling back, insisting she saw the messages last year and just didn't confront me because it looked like I had stopped. Apparently, Sabrina had been snooping through my social media accounts on the home computer while I was at work, which, frankly, should have been boring as hell, considering I only have family and a couple of work friends on there. I tried explaining this to her, even offering to let her log into all of my accounts to see for herself. But she wasn't having any of it. She started hurling accusations, calling me a liar, a pervert, and worse. Then she began throwing things at me. That's when I drew a hard line. I told her if she threw one more object, I'd have her removed from the house, just like I had her sister taken out. She cursed at me, stomped off to the master bedroom, and slammed the door. At this point, I was beyond confused. I had no idea what to think. So I went into my office, fired up my desktop, and typed bimbo wife Mandy into Google. And wouldn't you know it, there was an Instagram, and a Twitter, and a Reddit, and of course, an OnlyFans. I clicked one of the Instagram links, and up popped a photo of a ridiculously busty woman like physics-defying proportions, and guess where she's from? Australia. Now, remember all those nice things I said earlier about my brother? Guess who was visiting us last Christmas from Australia? Guess who I told? Sure, go ahead and use my office computer to kill time if you're jet-lagged. As far as I can tell, after his wife and kids went to bed, my brother logged into Instagram or whatever, and was probably messaging or paying for content from this woman. Incredible. What a stand-up guy. I'd love nothing more than to call him and not only confirm my suspicions, but also unload on him. But it's like 2 or 3 in the morning over there, so it'll have to wait. Meanwhile, I'm crawling the walls, trying to process everything. I feel utterly let down by everyone. I briefly tried to mentally connect the dots between whatever Sabrina thought she saw and her actions with Elaine, but honestly, it doesn't track. Maybe she's more forgiving than I am, which is why she didn't confront me about what she saw. If she had, maybe I could have cleared it up, laid out my personal values on things like this, and even shown her how I would handle situations like the one she ended up in. Maybe that would have made a difference, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered at all. I don't know. All I know is this post is turning into a full-blown novel, and I've spent most of the morning venting when I should have been working. But getting this out of my head and onto the page has helped a little. That said, there are still probably 2 or 3 more updates left in this story. Talking to my brother, talking to my parents and Sabrina's parents, and ultimately figuring out where things stand between Sabrina and me. One thing I can say for sure, it feels like nearly every close relationship in my life right now is hanging by a thread. My parents have generally been supportive through all of this, but that support is starting to waver now that the financial consequences are becoming more real. Yes, the wedding is still off. That was basically a done deal from the beginning. Sabrina's parents, on the other hand, are pretty upset. I wouldn't be surprised if they're sticking pins into voodoo dolls shaped like me right now. For those wondering about Elaine, she's no longer in jail. Sabrina bailed her out, which I gave her a lot of grief over. I called her out for acting like her sister's lackey, and that must have hit a nerve because she ended up writing me this 20-page letter explaining how Elaine had been bossing her around since childhood. I've read it twice now, and honestly, I wish we'd had that conversation at any point over the past 6 years. Maybe things would have turned out differently. Who knows? Anyway, Reddit, if anyone's still following along, expect a final chapter of this saga in a day or 2, maybe a follow-up after what would have been the wedding day, August 10th. August 10th, 2023. This update has taken me longer to post than I intended. A lot's gone down over the past few days, and I've only just now had some free time after lunch to sit down and write it all out. I'll try to cover as much as I can, but first, I want to quickly respond to a couple of recurring comments from the last post. First, I don't have many details about what's going on with Max and his divorce. To my knowledge, the divorce is still moving forward, but I haven't seen any paperwork or anything official yet. That said, it's pretty clear where he stands. Also, I'm not in any position to dictate what Max should do, legally or otherwise. He's a grown man, and it's his situation to handle. My role is just to be there for him if he wants advice or support. Second, no, this is not some covert promo for an OnlyFans creator. If that were the case, I would have plugged it in the first post, which hit the Reddit front page and was seen by over 3 million people. The fact that 304 wife Mandy, a fellow Redditor, recognized her handle just isn't that surprising. There are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of creators who use Reddit to share their content. On that note, yes, I've spoken to Mandy. She was actually very helpful and confirmed something important for me. She also struck me as a genuinely kind person. But let's be clear, there's no romantic subplot developing here. Mandy is married apparently quite happily and has been for nearly 20 years. Her username should have been a clue about her vibe, and while her husband seems to be cool with it, she's definitely way more than an ordinary insurance guy like me could handle. Alright, with that cleared up, here's the actual update. I ended up assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy, but by then, it was too late to contact him. It was already the middle of the night on my end. I'm the type of person who can't let a problem go unsolved once it's in front of me. It's great for my career, but in situations like this, all it does is drive me insane. So, I decided to take a deep breath, put it aside for now, and focus on what I needed to do. The first thing on my list was contacting everyone on my side of the guest list that I hadn't yet informed about the wedding cancellation. As you may remember, I'd already told my parents and had them spread the word to the relatives on the day I made up my mind, but only Sabrina and I had the complete guest list. So, it was up to me to notify everyone else. Out of respect for my friends, I chose to call instead of text, though in hindsight, that might not have been the best choice. Every call turned into a lengthy explanation about why I was canceling the wedding. I could have easily given some other excuse, but I wanted people to understand that I wasn't being impulsive or getting cold feet. It was important to me, both for my own reputation and out of respect for those who had agreed to come and support Sabrina and me as a couple. Because of this, it wasn't until late in the evening that I managed to get through to everyone, which meant it was already morning in Australia. I knew what I needed to do next, but I wanted to make sure everything was in order first. So, I took a break, made a sandwich, and sat down to think about how to handle my brother's situation. Let's call him Carl for simplicity. Carl and I have always been close, despite the 13-year age gap between us. Growing up, he was like a quasi-parental figure to me. By the time I was old enough to form long-term memories, he was already on his way to adulthood. He was generous with his time, playing with me when most teenagers would have avoided it, and he generally seemed mature and wise. I respected him greatly. The idea that he had been sexting with someone who wasn't his wife in my house was something I was still trying to process. I knew I needed to talk to him about it, but with everything that had happened with Sabrina, I wasn't sure if I even cared about getting him to confess, just to clear my name. Was there anything worth saving, anyway? At the very least, for the sake of propriety, I had to yell at him about it and try to convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out to my let's call her Karen. It all depended on what he said and whether I believed him. I finished my meal, logged into Facebook, and video called Carl. Since Carl works mostly from home as a remote IT worker, he's almost always available during the day, and today was no exception. His phone barely rang once or twice before he answered. We exchanged pleasantries, and then I dove right in, asking if he had been using my computer to sex chat with women while he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and he leaned toward the camera frame, clearly closing his office door. Yeah, I did. Why? He asked. I swore under my breath and explained to Carl how Sabrina had thought his flirting was me, since he used my computer. I told him I wasn't happy about taking the hit for him and asked him point blank if Karen knew about it. He hesitated for a few seconds, stumbling over his words, then looked a bit sheepish and admitted that no, Karen didn't know, and he'd prefer to keep it that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been pretty rough since their youngest was born 4 years ago, especially in the bedroom department. Carl had always been a pretty private person, particularly when it came to intimate details with his younger brother, but this time he laid it all out. Things had been bad. He'd grown tired of being rejected, and no matter what he did or how much he helped around the house, Karen was always too tired. This eventually led to performance anxiety on the rare occasions when Karen was in the mood for intimacy, which only made things worse. He said, "There's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding the kids that would get me laid. It just wasn't happening." So, he started spending more time in his office at night. Working, he even did air quotes when he said that. Evidently, his work turned into a hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites, which, given the relative privacy of his office, spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down that he wasn't. I thought I believed him, he seemed sincere, but there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was off. Maybe it was because of all the deceit I'd encountered recently, but I found myself doubting my own brother, who had always been a stand-up guy to me. I hated being in this situation. The problem I faced was complicated. If I wanted to clear my name, I need to get my brother to admit to Sabrina that it was him all along. But if he did that, there was no guarantee Sabrina wouldn't spitefully tell Karen. I personally thought it might be best if Karen knew, but at the same time, I wasn't sure I felt right about potentially detonating a bomb on my brother's marriage over something he said he stopped and was clearly caught in a moral gray area. I didn't have an immediate answer on what to do, but I did urge him to tell his wife the truth and to seek marriage counseling. He mentioned that they'd actually been going for the last 6 months, and while it had been helpful, what had really made a difference for him was getting a prescription for generic Viagra. I nearly did a spit take, spraying water all over my computer screen. He told me that they had been trying to ensure they spent intimate time together a couple of times a week, and the Viagra had helped him overcome his performance anxiety to the point where now they both looked forward to their time together after the kids went to bed. The general vibe of what he was telling me was something like, "Hey, things are actually going in the right direction now, so please don't screw this up for us." I really didn't want to be in this position, not just for Carl and Karen, but for my 2 nieces as well. If what Carl was telling me was true, I could be throwing a firebomb into a relationship that was beginning to heal. It was unpredictable what might happen, so while it might disappoint some, I felt the best course of action at that moment was to wait and see. After all, I was going to meet him in a couple of weeks, and once I got him alone and a few drinks in him, I would definitely get to the bottom of it. That seemed like the best plan. That night, I went to bed early. I didn't see Sabrina until the next morning. She looked like she hadn't slept much. I asked her where she had been, mostly out of habit since we had been together for almost 6 years. She told me she had gone down to the courthouse for Elaine's arraignment to post bail. The courts close at 1 p.m. on weekends, which explained why she had disappeared soon after I went into my office. Afterward, she drove Elaine to her parents' house and stayed the night there. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to explain to her parents that I had called off the wedding. I asked if her parents knew the reason why, and she snapped, "Of course they do." I tried to stay calm, but by this point in the ordeal, I was losing my patience. I bit back. "Are you going to move back there now, so they have both girls at home?" It was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Elaine out of jail really bothered me. "You don't need to be an ass about this," she said, to which I shot back, "and you don't need to be Elaine's underling." I could see Sabrina visibly flinch when I said that. It was clear my words had struck a chord, as the corners of Sabrina's eyes began to tear up. I took a deep breath and calmed down, and we both stood there in the living room, silently, for a minute or two. Finally, Sabrina spoke up. "Our parents are going to be here at 3. I was about to get upset for not being consulted on this, but I stopped myself. It was just my ego talking. After all, I still needed to meet with everyone to sort out the wedding details and address the remaining deposit. Plus, I owed it to everyone to explain, face to face, why the wedding wasn't happening. So, I decided to go along with it. I tried to keep myself busy, but there wasn't much to do on a Sunday. Time just seemed to drag when you know what's coming. When 3 p.m. arrived, so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sabrina had bought just a month after we moved into the house. It was a solid oak piece, secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because of its beautiful finish and ability to seat 8 though, ironically, we weren't having a dinner party like she always wanted. The next 3 hours were brutal. No one was happy, nor should they have been. The best support I received came from my own parents, but even that was tempered with well, it's his decision to make, which was essentially their way of saying, "We think this is crazy too, but we're backing him." Honestly, I was fine with that. I didn't need my parents to take the heat for my decision to cancel the wedding. I was ready to own it. Eventually, we came to a reasonable agreement about the wedding. We tried to recover whatever money we could and split it based on who contributed. Some expenses, like the honeymoon, were paid by me, and others, like the flowers, were covered by Sabrina's parents. We'd all share the losses as best as we could. However, when the conversation turned to the house, Sabrina firmly objected to my suggestion of paying back her or her parents for the deposit. It became clear that she had no intention of moving out. Now, Sabrina and I hadn't really discussed the living situation in detail, so when I mentioned settling the house equity, it caught her completely off guard. She assumed I was implying that I expected her to leave our home, which set off a huge reaction. She threw a fit, and I didn't blame her. I should have discussed our relationship status with her before jumping into financial discussions with her parents. It was clear to everyone, including our parents, how I felt about our relationship, but Sabrina was beside herself. She absolutely refused to accept that we were breaking up over this, and she made it clear, "I am not moving out of my house, and we are not breaking up." And that's how my Sunday night ended, after our parents left. Sabrina and I tried to talk things through some more, but we kept going in circles. I had to fight my natural instinct to get frustrated and push for a resolution. To be honest, I was pretty exhausted and just wanted to shut off for a while. Believe it or not, we ended up sitting on the couch, watching a movie in silence, until it was time to go to bed. We left things with a "we'll talk more tomorrow" and retreated to our separate rooms. On Monday morning, I woke up to a large handwritten letter from Sabrina slipped under my door. I glanced at the first few pages, but decided I'd deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sabrina was still in bed. She must have stayed up late writing it. At the office, I rescheduled some meetings and started making calls to the vendors and venues on my list. The others were being handled by Sabrina or her parents. The results were mixed. The catering company insisted that I pay most of their fees, claiming they had already ordered the food. I shot back at them, questioning if they really expected me to eat week-old steak, but my appeal fell on deaf ears. On the flip side, the DJ I'd hired was incredibly kind and refunded nearly all of the money, though it wasn't much. The day passed with more calls and work, and I finally got around to reading Sabrina's letter. It was 20 pages long, so I'll just summarize. The main point was that, since childhood, Sabrina had been bullied by Elaine, and in response, Sabrina's coping mechanism had been to go along with whatever Elaine wanted or expected. Sabrina admitted that this behavior had become a pattern in her life. She was always afraid to rock the boat, avoid causing conflict, and often held back her own opinions. As I reflected on this, I began to see a clearer picture of our relationship. Honestly, when I thought about it critically, I realized that Sabrina had always been a bit too perfect as a girlfriend. What I mean by that is that she never disagreed with me, never prioritized her plans over mine, or really pushed back on anything I wanted to do. She always seemed to make herself available and acted almost like a yes woman. We never had so much as a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument until now. That may seem ideal in a relationship, but it wasn't. Looking at it through this new lens, I realized Sabrina had a deep-seated insecurity, a need to please others. It was what people call people-pleasing behavior. When I thought about it this way, a lot of things started to make sense. And I realized, despite being with Sabrina for 6 years, I didn't really know her all that well. It's like Sabrina has built this image around herself, which is really just a reflection of what she thinks people want to see. In our relationship, it feels like she's been playing the role of the perfect girlfriend, but never really letting me in to see who she truly is as a person. I can't even say that what I saw in those text messages was the real Sabrina. It's almost certainly just another reflection, this time of Elaine and all her flaws and faults. It may sound strange, but it feels like we're in an unequal relationship. Maybe Sabrina loves me for who I am, for how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve. But maybe I've only loved her for the mirror she's been holding up to me. I know this might sound too metaphysical, but it's like this elusive idea that I'm still trying to grasp. All I know is that in the past few days, I've probably learned more about Sabrina than I did in the last 6 years. The letter she wrote me was the first real glimpse into her childhood that I've had. That night, we talked more about her childhood, her behavior, and the conclusion we came to was that she needs help. She's a grown woman, but she's still stuck acting like a child, too scared to displease anyone for fear of facing Elaine's wrath, her parents' disapproval, or the loss of love from the one she cares about. This isn't a healthy foundation for a relationship. Now, I feel much more confident in my decision to call off the wedding. It was the right choice, no doubt about it. In fact, it couldn't have been more right. After our talk that night, I went to bed feeling much lighter than I had in days. This update brings me up to where I am now. Once again, it's a lengthy one, and I promise I won't wait 2 to 3 days to post the next one. If I do, I'll end up falling behind forever. For those wondering, the situation with my brother is more or less resolved, and I'll update on that tomorrow. As for Sabrina and I, things are still a bit up in the air, but there's a plan moving forward. I'll get to it as soon as I can, but as you can imagine, there's a lot to write, and I can only do what I can do. August 31st, 2023 update. Sorry this update took so long. To be blunt, after the initial chaos died down and my hypervigilance faded, I sank into a deep depressive funk that sapped most of my will to do anything. Recounting the circus that is my life became incredibly unappealing. However, the wedding date has now come and gone. I'm on vacation with my siblings and my brother's family, and I'm starting to feel like most of this is behind me. Anyway, on to the updates. First off, since this seems to be what bothers people most, my brother and his wife are doing fine. As I mentioned in my last post, I urged my brother to come clean to Karen about his sexting with an Australian girl, known as Mandy, who he had been chatting with. Mandy, by the way, is a very nice person. I briefly mentioned in my previous update that I had gotten confirmation from Mandy to back up my brother's story. According to her, the timelines matched, and his account no longer exists. She could be lying to protect a client, but I don't think that's the case. She seemed genuine. As for my brother, he did eventually tell Karen about the situation during one of their marriage counseling sessions. According to him, she took it pretty well and is treating it as water under the bridge. I did pull Karen aside last week to ask if she was truly okay with everything. She told me we're not as squeaky clean as you think. Both of us watch porn, and that's basically what I consider this to be. It's not like he was going to run off and have an affair with her. I asked her if she would feel the same way if he had visited a hooker. It's legal where they live. And she said no, she wouldn't, but he didn't. So, I guess that's their line. It's a bit different from mine and definitely different from the opinion of many loud voices on Reddit. But from what I've seen, they seem to be doing fine. If the noises I heard from their hotel room last night are any indication, their dead bedroom situation is totally resolved. Honestly, they're borderline taking full advantage of the situation right now. My sister, who's substituting for Sabrina, switched rooms with them, and now the kids are staying with her. The two little girls love having a sleepover with their auntie, and the babysitters are happy to look after them while Carl and Karen do whatever they're doing. We all know what they're up to, but I'll spare the details. Overall, I think I made the right call in giving Carl the space to resolve things on his own, even though people criticized me for it. I strongly believe that the situation with my brother and the situation with Elaine are completely different. I don't believe that cybering someone you know as a professional sex worker is anywhere near the same as actively having an affair. I also think my handling of the situation was worlds apart from how Sabrina dealt with her affair. As I mentioned before, she not only hid the affair from Max, but she also actively engaged in disparaging conversations about him, saying several things I won't go into here for various reasons. That said, I feel good about the choice I made, and for those who disagree with me, they can take their opinions elsewhere for all I care. As for the wedding, there's not much to say. Sabrina, our families, and I lost a lot of money on it, but that was expected. I made the caterer either give me a bigger refund or provide me with the food, and she chose the latter, which I guess is fair enough. We now have a lot of frozen steak, chicken, and fish, which was delivered to my parents' house. I think they're distributing it to anyone who's interested. On top of that, some wedding gifts from distant relatives arrived at my place, and they'll stay here until we can return them. But overall, the wedding date just came and went, and for the sake of our sanity, Sabrina and I spent it apart. As for the situation with Max and Elaine, I don't think this is something that will be resolved anytime soon. Max is absolutely divorcing Elaine, but it's tough for him, primarily because she's making it harder by begging him to reconsider. On top of that, school is starting again, so Max will be back with his students instead of caring for their daughter every day, which is really weighing on him right now. Spending so much time with his parents and his kid was really helping him mentally. Also, despite what some people hoped, Max hasn't made a big scene about the affair at Elaine's workplace, even though he probably could get both of them fired, considering it's become clear they were using work trips to hook up on the company's dime. Nor has he told Jack's wife about the affair, which I strongly disagree with. When I questioned him about it, he just said he wasn't in a hurry. After all, he has the text messages, the photo from the pub, and the video he took when he walked into the house. Essentially, he could bury this guy whenever he wants. In a twisted way, I think Max, who's usually the laid-back, Birkenstock-wearing teacher, might be enjoying making Jack sweat it out. Maybe he's also enjoying making Elaine fully realize her place in the world now, as just a side piece to a married man. I'm not sure, but Max has definitely gotten darker through all of this, and honestly, I can't blame him. Everything I know about Elaine comes secondhand from Sabrina, but from what I understand, she's basically just going to work and then going straight back to her parents' house every day, like a teenager on curfew. I don't think her parents are happy with either of their daughters right now, but oddly enough, despite the very public collapse of Sabrina and my wedding, it seems to be getting drowned out by the ongoing drama of Elaine's divorce. Sabrina mentioned that it almost felt like they forgot about her once they realized Max was seriously moving forward with the divorce, and their concern shifted to having access to their granddaughter. I get it, they're very doting grandparents, and I'm sure their frustration with Elaine is compounded by the fact that their time with their granddaughter will be cut in half. Now, on to the big event. As for Sabrina and me, I don't think this update will make anyone happy. It won't satisfy those who urged me to cut her out of my life, nor will it please those who feel I should treat her with sympathy and compassion for her obviously troubled mental state. The truth is, aside from the lying and hiding the affair, what hit me hardest was probably the way she carried on with her sister in those text messages. Maybe people would understand me better if I shared the texts, but I refuse to repeat them, and I don't want to get into arguments over their contents. Suffice it to say, they were enough to make me reconsider Sabrina's entire character, and that's where I am today, still processing it. That's not to say we're together. Definitely not in the way we were when we were engaged, but we haven't completely closed the door on the relationship either. I've come to understand more about what kind of person Sabrina is, distinguishing which parts of her are genuine and which parts were shaped by her family dynamics in an attempt to ingratiate herself to others, including her sister. It helps to put a name to what's going on with her, this people-pleasing behavior, and it's even more helpful to understand how it started, especially with the examples from her family that she shared with me. What's even more encouraging is that she's actively seeking help for it. On top of that, even though I found her behavior gross and inappropriate, I give her credit for how she handled the situation when I came home that night to find her and Elaine on the couch. She didn't lie, minimize, or try to make excuses. She took accountability for what she did. Remember, at the time, she didn't know I had seen her text messages with Elaine, and she could have tried to edit her participation or downplay it, but she didn't. She was honest with me, even though it made her look bad, and that counts for a lot in my book, which is why I'm considering changing the chapter, not closing it. To be clear, this isn't a win for those who want to forgive her and blame everything on her sister, because honestly, I haven't forgiven her, and our situation is very different now. She's moved back into her old room at her parents' house, much like Elaine. Although Sabrina will likely be moving out in a couple of weeks because she says the environment isn't good for her mental health or her efforts to get help for her issues. I'm paying back her equity in the house in fortnightly installments from my paycheck until it's all settled, which will help her cover the cost of getting her own apartment. We are definitely not together right now. Sabrina didn't want to accept this at first, and I can see her point and even sympathize with it. But if she really does have these emotional problems, then I felt that pushing the issue might light a fire under her to get the real help she needs. Just forgiving her would be like sweeping everything under the rug, which would only spell disaster for our relationship in the long run. I really wish she had opened up to me earlier before everything hit the fan. I would have much preferred to handle the problem as a loving partner and offer her more support, but she never really gave me the chance to do that, which is a shame. So, this is where we are right now. It's basically a wait-and-see situation with Sabrina. Maybe one of us will get tired of it and throw in the towel completely, or maybe we'll both try to work through it. Time will tell. It could very well end up being me, but honestly, I have no desire to complicate my life further by getting involved with any other woman right now. So, I think we're looking at a period of months before we get a firm resolution on this one way or another, and I'm okay with that. Not everything needs to move at a breakneck, emotionally charged pace. If I look at my situation, I'm doing fine financially, we're separated, and we're not living together. I'm cautiously cynical about the whole situation. That said, I'm not deluding myself. If at any point I feel like Sabrina's issues are too much to handle, or if I don't think rebuilding trust is possible, I'll walk. I have no interest in prolonging something I see as hopeless. That being said, I don't think it's hopeless. I just think it's going to be difficult, and I'm open to waiting a bit to see how it plays out. To that end, I'm even seeking my own counselor to help process the events of the last few weeks, as well as reflect on how Sabrina and I interacted. I truly believe that while I may have been deceived by her, I also allowed myself to be, to some extent. Who wouldn't love a girlfriend who never disagrees with you, always wants to do what you do, and goes out of her way to make sure you're happy before herself? The struggle I'm dealing with, and maybe Sabrina too, is determining how much of that was genuine love from her and how much was driven by a deep-seated need to please others due to her fear of rejection and anxiety. I guess once we reach the bottom of that question, we'll know the answer to Sabrina and my relationship. I know this isn't the update everyone wanted, but it's all I've got. Maybe check back in a few months to see how it's playing out. Once again, thanks to everyone who sent supportive messages, and as for the rest of you, LOL. Did you tell Sabrina that you've spoken with the model? Yep, I cleared up the whole situation with Mandy, my brother, and the sexting. I even offered to have my brother confirm it, but Sabrina believed me right away. I asked her why she didn't bring it up if it made her so uncomfortable, and she said she was too afraid of losing me over it. I pointed out that this was part of her overall problem, and she agreed. That led to another long conversation about her insecurities. Like I mentioned in my earlier post, I understand, at least intellectually, what she's going through, and I'm willing to give this some time to see how it develops. But ultimately, I'm not eager to be in a relationship with someone who uses deception as a way of managing her insecurities. She needs to work through this, not just for our relationship, but for her own well-being in life. Have you asked if she ever cheated on you? Honestly, that was never a concern of mine, and it still isn't. As I mentioned before, she's been pretty much attached to my hip for years now. No after-work drinks, no girls' nights, no weekends away with the girls, nothing like that. Plus, I've had complete access to her phone, social media, and everything since we started living together. What she did with Elaine was wrong, but from understanding her better, I think that was her way of avoiding confrontation with her older, domineering sister. I know she has her issues, but cheating hasn't been one of them, so it never crossed my mind to worry about it. And honestly, due to my work in fraud investigation, she'd have to be exceptional to pull something off like that under my nose. In fact, the whole reason I called off the wedding was because I caught her in a single lie. Will I be blamed for not helping my friend in his bitter divorce from his cheating ex-wife? I honestly hope everyone can follow this, because sometimes I'm not sure I can. I have a friend, Max, who's currently going through a brutal divorce. His wife was caught cheating over a month ago, and I was one of the people who helped expose her. They have a young child who's living with the father and is being taken care of by his parents when he's at work. Now, here's where people need to keep track. The ex-wife in this situation is actually Sabrina's sister, who's also the reason Sabrina and I are no longer engaged. It's a complicated situation. 2 days ago, Sabrina came to me saying she overheard her sister and parents plotting to falsely accuse Max of something that would trigger an emergency custody hearing. She wants my help to turn the tables on her sister. Yes, there's some bitterness here, but as I said, it's complicated. Even though Sabrina is my ex-fiancée, I think she's a good person who wants to help, but I also wonder if she's trying to pull me into this situation to prove she's against her sister. The sister played a role in why Sabrina and I are no longer together. My gut instinct is to tell Sabrina to just inform Max and his lawyer about what's going on and let them handle it. However, she's insisting I help her trap her sister so she can provide evidence to Max to play the Uno reverse card in the divorce. Her most convincing argument is that this opportunity might not come again, and I agree with that. But assuming I could actually help, would I be wrong for not doing so, especially since my motivation is essentially just trying to understand Sabrina's motives? After all, Sabrina could just testify on Max's behalf if it came to that. Judging from the situation, though, I think the wisest choice is to just tell Max what Sabrina said, without getting tangled in a scheme to entrap his wife, especially since a child is involved. The divorce situation is complicated enough without the two of you planning something, which, to be honest, sounds like Sabrina's motivation is revenge. I understand where you're coming from, but the issue I'm facing is that simply telling Max about the situation isn't enough. It's basically just hearsay. I need Sabrina to take the step of confronting the claims and signing an affidavit, but she's hesitant to do so because that would make it clear to her parents that she was the one who exposed them. That's why she's asking me to help her collect evidence to pass on to Max in a more anonymous way. Honestly, I feel like we've been going in circles on this for the last day or so. To put it simply, she's struggling with the fallout of being willing to testify, especially since she's living with her parents right now. I get where she's coming from. She wants to do the right thing, but she's trying to navigate her own situation as well. The one good thing about this is that it won't be too late for her to testify on behalf of her soon-to-be ex-brother-in-law. So if she hesitates a bit, hopefully she'll do the right thing in the end. December 5th, 2023. It's been almost 2 months since I made my original post about my former fiancée reaching out to me for help regarding an issue in her family. I think some of the advice in that thread was really helpful and helped me clarify my own thoughts on the matter. Looking back, I realized that my distrust of Sabrina's intentions was likely overblown on my part and, ultimately, wasn't as important as I initially thought. What I really should be focusing on is being a friend to both her and Max. As for Sabrina, it became very clear to me that her relationship with me wasn't as central to her actions as I selfishly assumed. She's still dealing with a lot of resentment toward her sister and feels guilty not just for her role in Max's situation, but also for how the upheaval has affected her 3-year-old niece. Add in a lifetime of family tension, and I can understand why she's eager to do anything to get back at Elaine. Her reaching out to me made sense because, of all the people she knows, I'm probably the one most likely to help and offer good advice. I'll admit I was overly cynical, thinking she was using the situation to try to appear like she was making amends and working on her issues. But upon reflection, I realized that not everything in her life revolves around me or our past relationship. Basically, I've learned that I need to stop being so distrustful when people are actually trying to do the right thing. As for Max, since Sabrina had warned me about her sister and parents plotting to file a false report against him, I was fully committed to informing him as soon as possible, regardless of Sabrina's desire to approach it more subtly. That said, I made one final attempt to get Sabrina to be the one to reach out and handle the situation herself. I thought it might help her rebuild her relationship with her soon-to-be ex-brother-in-law and help her make amends to both him and her niece. I understood her hesitancy and why she wanted my help. Her parents were fully on board with the plan, and she wasn't emotionally strong enough to face any fallout from them. After all, she had spent her whole life being bullied by her family, and to make matters worse, she was living under their roof. We discussed it, and I promised her that if things went south, I'd help her find a place to stay. She then asked if I would go with her when she faced Max. I almost said yes out of habit, but I declined, believing it would be better for everyone if she faced this on her own. She reluctantly agreed. I wasn't there when Sabrina and Max met, but I know what happened at his parents' house. His parents, of course, were aware of Sabrina's role in covering up Elaine's infidelity, and there were some harsh words directed at her, which, in my opinion, were understandable. Sabrina told Max about the plot, and then they called Max's lawyer, where she gave a statement. As chaotic as it all was, the meeting ended rather quickly. One thing Sabrina mentioned, though, was that she was grateful Max let her play with her niece. He didn't have to do that, but it meant a lot to her. I could hear the sorrow in her voice, and for a moment, I wondered if Sabrina was carrying too much of the weight for Elaine's actions. I'm not sure how to address that, or if I even should. To wrap this up quickly due to the word limit. Several weeks after my offer, Sabrina didn't need a place to stay. She managed to get her own apartment not long after we spoke. I did speed up the repayment process by a couple of weeks to help her out. Then, shortly after she moved out, Elaine made her move. I don't want to go into the details of what she accused Max of, but it was vile, something so horrible, it could get you killed in prison if it were true. Honestly, I was shocked when I heard it because as despicable as Elaine is, I didn't think she was capable of that level of evil, nor did I expect her parents to go along with it. As you can imagine, there was an emergency child custody hearing that night. As they discussed the charges, Max's lawyer pulled out a dated and notarized affidavit from Sabrina detailing the plot, along with a recorded interview saved on a USB stick. I'd love to say that Elaine got her comeuppance or was driven out of town, but honestly, we don't know yet how it will all play out. She's facing charges for this stunt, though I'm not sure what they are exactly. I'm not particularly hopeful she'll face more than a slap on the wrist, though, because if we locked up every bitter divorcee for their antics, the prisons would be full. That said, the custody hearing didn't go Elaine's way, and now there's a court order in place granting Max primary custody. Elaine will have to have a court-appointed observer with her whenever she visits their child. This order will stay in place until the divorce is finalized, which might be happening soon, as I think Elaine's dramatic failure has taken a lot of the wind out of her sails when it comes to making this divorce difficult. Max mentioned her lawyer has been in touch about discussing a settlement, so that's a positive sign. That's pretty much where we are now. As you can imagine, Sabrina is pretty much on the outs with her family right now, and that's not likely to change. Even though it's the holidays, she accepted that this would probably happen if she gave her statement, so she says she was prepared for it, but I can tell it still stings. Despite everything, she's been treated badly by her family for most of her life, but it still hurts for her to be cut off like this. She even joked that it's helping me get over my own issues with her family, but I can tell it's weighing on her. A lot of people who know my backstory might be upset by this, but I impulsively offered Sabrina the chance to come with me to Australia to visit my brother and his family using my parents' airline miles. I honestly didn't think she would accept since she's a teacher and they aren't quite on break yet, but she surprised me. My brother has a large property in semi-rural Queensland, complete with a few bungalows. We cleared out the snakes yesterday, and now Sabrina and I are neighbors looking forward to surfing on Christmas Day. Our relationship is still very much complicated, hence the separate accommodations, but I'm feeling better about things in general. The biggest issue I had with Sabrina, and the reason I canceled our wedding, was that I didn't understand how she could act the way she did with her sister. Now that I know the backstory between them and have seen how she completely severed that relationship, it's hard for me to be seriously concerned about Elaine's influence over her. It would require a level of paranoia that I don't have, and frankly, one that could be considered a mental illness. Still, we're taking it slow. To be honest, we're in this weird, exclusive platonic relationship right now. It obviously can't last. But while Sabrina has made it clear how she would like things to resolve, I'm being cautious. It's not that I don't love her, I always have, but I'm uncertain about where our relationship is headed. I'm not in any rush to get back to the altar, and I think most of my friends would probably disown me if I did, considering I just called off our wedding a few months ago. Sabrina knows how I feel, and she's been mostly understanding of it. Even though she tells me that she doesn't care about getting married, I can't shake the feeling that she secretly does. The best way I can explain it is that the relationship we once had, the one that led us toward marriage, is over. Maybe we'll build something new that could eventually go in that direction, but I'm no longer sure that's something I want. It's not just Sabrina, it's with anyone. Seeing all the marital problems over the past 6 months has left a bad taste in my mouth. Whatever future we have together will need to account for these feelings, and I want to be sure I'm not wasting her time or leading her on. Time will tell. Thanks to the 5 people who are still following my chaotic life story. If anything else interesting happens, I'll probably post it on my profile. It's been a wild ride, and the support I've received from the Reddit community has been amazing. Thanks again. December 7th, 2023. I just found out something from Sabrina today that I didn't know, but but I think it's important to share. Max's lawyer presented a lot more evidence than just Sabrina's testimony. They had their child examined by 2 psychologists after the accusations came to light. During this process, some things came out. Their daughter had caught Elaine and her affair partner in the act multiple times at their home, and her mom had been giving her ice cream to keep her quiet. Max's lawyer read from one of the psychologist interviews, and let's just say, the phrase "big yikes" came to mind. No one deserves a mother like that. It makes sense now that Elaine only has court-supervised visitation. Sabrina says it seems like the daughter only saw them doing it a couple of times, and nothing happened to her. Needless to say, I think Elaine's in serious trouble now. I'm shocked her parents haven't kicked her out by now. I'm curious what their thought process was in going along with her plan. Was it just to punish Max for not tolerating being cheated on? Or did they think their daughter was the victim? Either way, it's clear that thanks to what Sabrina did, they've made their niece's life better. Now, they both need therapy because while they've started to understand their own issues, they're heading in a completely wrong direction. I'm pretty sure it was all about custody. Max and his daughter had been living with his parents, so he was the primary caregiver. He was offering Elaine joint custody every other weekend with their daughter, the house, and a portion of his retirement accounts. Basically, if Max got anywhere near what he was asking for, Elaine's parents might not have seen their granddaughter more than once or twice a month. I think they couldn't stand it, and it pushed them into making some poor decisions. As for Elaine, I think she was hoping that Max would tell his lawyers to back off. I don't think they expected to be thwarted at the initial hearing and were hoping to negotiate. Definitely a case of F around and find out, if you ask me. I have a question about how you were able to confirm that your brother stopped talking to that model. Did he use his real name with her, or did you know his username? Opie, yes and yes. It seems like your ex has stepped up to make amends for facilitating Max's betrayal. Have you spoken to him? Opie, we talk, but we're not super close friends, so there's probably a lot I don't know. It's really his business if he wants to talk to me about it. I assume he would. June 19th, 2024. Hi everyone. It's been a while since I logged into Reddit on this account, but I've received a couple of hundred messages asking for an update, so I figured I'd clear up a few things that are being asked frequently. First off, Max and Elaine are divorced. It took a little over 6 months to finalize, but considering Elaine's stalling tactics, that seems to be typical for where we live. The only noteworthy things about the divorce are that Max was granted primary physical custody of their daughter, which was a bit of a victory, considering how these cases typically go. But to be fair, Elaine mostly did that to herself. Max's lawyer made a huge issue of her false accusations in court, as well as the psychologist reports, and with the fact that Max had already been living with his parents and caring for their daughter since he filed, the judge ultimately decided it was best to leave things as they were. It's true what they say, possession is 9/10 of the law. Keep that in mind if you ever get divorced yourselves. The financial fallout wasn't too bad. The house was sold, and Max got a slightly bigger share than Elaine. No spousal maintenance or alimony. That was that. I actually had dinner with Max at a local bar and grill near where I work one night. He thanked me again for my help and had a lot of nice things to say about Sabrina, which I appreciated. She's really been stepping up as an aunt to his daughter and spending time with her often. I didn't mention to him that this was because there's no way Sabrina would get to see her during Elaine's weekends, as the sisters are still not speaking, but I'm sure he can figure that out. One interesting thing that came up during dinner was that Max told me Elaine wrote him a big letter during the proceedings, begging for another chance. In this letter, she confessed a lot of things that even Sabrina didn't know about. Turns out, this wasn't Elaine's first time cheating. She had cheated on Max when they were dating, and again shortly after they got married. Max and I were both stunned by this. Why would you marry someone you were cheating on? No offense to Max, but he's not rich or some super attractive guy, just a normal, slightly quirky high school teacher. If Elaine didn't like that, she certainly didn't need to marry him. Anyway, it blew my mind. She went on to say that she was seeing a therapist and working on herself, same old story, but neither Max nor I felt that therapy would be much help. It was clear to me that Elaine's cheating wasn't due to some hidden childhood trauma or self-esteem issues. Given what she tried to pull in court, it's much more likely that she has a serious morality problem. I don't think therapy can fundamentally change someone's nature that much. I shared with Max some of the insights I had gained from my conversations with Sabrina about Elaine's relationship and childhood. We both concluded that, at her core, Elaine is just a user. She does whatever she wants, uses whoever she wants, and never considers the impact on others because she thinks she can manipulate everyone into letting her off the hook. Needless to say, Elaine's letter didn't have much of an effect on Max. It only strengthened his resolve to divorce her. Max said he felt that she was so dishonest and manipulative that even her confessions had an air of manipulation. I tend to agree. It seemed like a last-ditch attempt to appear sincere, but it was too little, too late. During that dinner, Max also told me that he had finally contacted Jack's wife, the affair partner, a couple of weeks ago. I asked him why he waited so long, and he said he just wanted to make sure it wouldn't interfere with his divorce from Elaine. I didn't love that answer, but I could understand it. He said that she was a nice lady who was apparently shocked when he presented the evidence of what Jack and Elaine had been up to. Remember, Max had video of them in his house. It seems like Mrs. Jack had no clue anything was going on. She was too busy taking care of their small child, who was about 1 or 2 years old. Max felt pretty bad about the situation, but he said that if the roles were reversed, he would have wanted to know. I could only nod in agreement with him. It seemed like a tough but necessary thing for him to do. There's no update on whether that couple is getting divorced, but Max said he got the impression that she would try to salvage things because of their young child. I asked him if he was interested in getting back at Jack, but Max just waved me off. He said that anything he did to Jack would probably just make life harder for his wife and child, and he'd rather just move on with his life. I understand that, but I think Max is a better person than I am because if I were in his shoes, I would have definitely given the guy a piece of my mind. I guess Jack has enough problems on his plate anyway. Lastly, I know people have been asking for an update on me and Sabrina, so here it is. We had a great trip in Queensland. The weather was hot, but it was pretty mild for the season. There were lots of beach days and plenty of time spent with my nieces. Sabrina is an elementary school teacher, and she's fantastic with kids. All in all, it was a great time. I think both Sabrina and I found it really helpful to get away for a couple of weeks. Being together in a different setting allowed us to focus on the present instead of dwelling on the turbulent experiences we'd both been through. By the time we left to return to the States, we were both in a very relaxed state of mind, and many of the issues that once seemed insurmountable started to feel much smaller. That said, there are still some sore spots for both of us. Predictably, my newfound reluctance to get married has been hard for Sabrina to adjust to. And honestly, the better our relationship became, the more this issue grew. I had to explain that it wasn't just about us, it was more about witnessing a series of difficult relationships and experiences in a short amount of time, including cheating, lies, and emotional pain. All of that made the idea of marriage feel too heavy for me to even consider right now. She sat with that for a few days, and then one night, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she asked me if I still intended to have children someday. It was a fair question, and one that I hadn't really been asking myself. One thing I had been looking forward to was starting a family with Sabrina. She would be an amazing mom. She works with kids every day, and instead of being put off by it, you can tell it's basically her calling. The way she is with my nieces is just adorable. Anyway, I realized that while I may have emotionally given up on marriage, I hadn't given up on having a family. I know that sounds odd, but her question made me think long-term in a way I hadn't been willing to before. At the time, I struggled to come up with a solid answer, but I was open with Sabrina about my feelings. She seemed to understand. She said she wanted a family too, but if I didn't, she'd still want to be with me. It was nice to hear, but I'm not sure I'd be happy with that outcome. Like I said, Sabrina would be an amazing mom, and it feels like if being with me prevents her from having that opportunity, I would be doing her a disservice. We went back and forth on this, me trying to convince her that she was giving up too much, and her holding firm to her stance. In the end, we agreed to take some time to think about it more and revisit the conversation later. So that's what I did. I know some people don't want to have kids, but deep down, I knew I did. More than that, I wanted a family something similar to the one I grew up with. To me, that means a mother and father together with their children, all living in the same house. At this point, whether we're married or not doesn't really matter, because even if we split, there would still be child support and custody arrangements, and I'd likely still be a de facto spouse. Anyway, splitting communal property and all that is like the old saying, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You can call it whatever you want, but it essentially feels like a marriage, with or without the certificate. Once I accepted that, I started asking myself if I'd be willing to get into a child-rearing, common law type situation with anyone other than Sabrina. Would it be easier to commit if it was someone else? The more I thought about it, the less I felt that way. I love Sabrina, that was never in doubt, but my trust in her had been pretty seriously shaken. If we had more time, and there hadn't been a wedding deadline hanging over our heads, we might have been able to work things out. I strongly felt that the time pressure played a big role in me pulling the plug on the wedding plans. Now, before anyone gets their hopes up, Sabrina and I didn't rush into getting married. However, we did sit down again for a much-needed, serious conversation about our future. I admitted that I still wanted to have a family someday, and she told me that if we did have children together, she would prefer to be married or at least cohabitating. I pointed out that, in our state, these things are basically the same after a couple of years. She acknowledged that, and then surprised me. She pulled out an envelope from her purse and handed it to me. I thought it would be another letter, but it wasn't. Instead, it was a prenuptial agreement. I asked when she had this drawn up, and and she told me it was shortly after we separated. She had planned to present it back then, but decided against it when she realized where I stood in our relationship. She said she thought it was more important to listen to me instead of trying to change my mind. That was an eye-opener for me because I had assumed, probably wrongly, that she was more resentful about the wedding being called off. She said she was more hurt than resentful, and if she was angry, it was at herself for being foolish. Still, she'd held on to the agreement, probably hoping that if the opportunity arose, it might show how seriously she was taking the mistake she made. I asked her if I had asked her to marry me. Would she have shown this to me? And she said, absolutely. She needed me to have complete trust in her. I don't want to let you or me down again, she said. I'm pretty good at reading people, and that felt like the most honest statement I'd heard in a long time. I read the agreement, and yes, I checked the date on her signature. Her story checked out. It seemed pretty reasonable to me, and there was even an infidelity clause in it, which clearly outlined what was considered infidelity. That was an eye-opener as well. Sabrina evidently considers a lot of behaviors that I might have overlooked to be much more serious. I mentioned that to her, and she said we could revise it later after a good discussion, but the main point seemed solid to me. I agreed with her. For now, we put the agreement aside and continued our conversation about where we go from here. To make a long story short, I asked Sabrina to move back in with me. I think she was taken aback because she immediately started crying. Sabrina's a messy crier, even when it's from happiness, and my t-shirt bore the brunt of it. She still has a few months left on her lease, so she'll stay there until it's up, and then we'll move her back into the house. She mentioned that when she moves in, she'd like to sign a rental agreement with me. I thought that was a bit much, especially since it's still months away, so we decided to put that thought aside for now. I won't say it felt like we closed one chapter and started another because it's not that simple. We've been going through a long process of sorting out our feelings, communicating, and for me, observing her actions. One downer at the time was when Sabrina told me, this is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, and that she has almost no one to talk to about it. It's not just Elaine she's not speaking to. She's still not talking to her parents either. Her father has tried to reach out, but she and her mother are acting as if the other doesn't exist. I have mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I think her family has been a big issue for her, and even though she's working through it with a therapist, neither of us think she's ready to deal with it yet. On the other hand, I wish things didn't have to be this way for her. My family and hers seem almost like polar opposites, and I can't help but wish she had been born into a family like mine. There are a lot of positive aspects of family life, like having good siblings and parents, that Sabrina hasn't really experienced, and that makes me sad for her. It makes her sad for herself too. The bright side is that my family has never stopped caring about her, and even my parents have been quietly rooting for us to work things out. So here we are today. We're still working through things at what might feel like a painfully slow pace for those reading on Reddit, but that's just how life goes sometimes. Overall, I'd say our relationship is much stronger now than it was before I called off the marriage. We have a much deeper understanding of each other, and Sabrina has really shown a lot of emotional growth over the past year. It's hard to believe it's been a whole year. It's surreal how quickly time has passed, but I'm happy to put most of it behind me. Like I said, I don't think we've turned a corner. It's been a much more gradual process, but after some reflection, I do feel like we're back on the right track. P.S. For those who are interested, I plan on finishing the pagoda this year. There's still enough time to get it done before summer ends, and I'd like to have at least a few fireside nights outside with my ex-fiancée and current girlfriend. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.